Welcome back to the channel, everyone. So in this video, I want to talk about a photo shoot I had back last fall with the NHL team, the Philadelphia Flyers, up in Philadelphia. And this shoot actually, I think, basically piggybacked right after the Naval Academy shoot I had up in Virginia for the Army-Navy uniform. So I went from Virginia straight up to Philadelphia to spend some time with the team, with the creative team, and then the team there in Philadelphia. And that was, I guess, probably my first commercial shoot up there in the city of Philadelphia. So it was a fun experience to get up there, have a cheesesteak, do some Philadelphia things for a couple of days, and then work with the team. And so I was part of the media day experience there with the Flyers. And I want to say they probably had 10 to 12 different stations where they're creating content for the season, and both video and still type stations. So there were a couple other photographers there, which I enjoyed meeting and hanging out a little bit, and then a lot of video type work. And I was stationed on the ice. I was like the photo station on ice. And I was surrounded, I want to say there were probably 3 other video stations kind of all around me. And I'll show some behind the scenes video of some of that. It was really cool to be in the mix. I appreciate the team having me up. And during this photo shoot, I wanted to touch on something that happened that really created some of my favorite images from the photo shoot, and that was a couple of misfires that I had during some action sequences that I was capturing during the setup. And we'll get more into detail on that after I kind of run through the normal stuff and just give you my thoughts on it and how it relates actually to an earlier photo shoot where I set up a whole actual shoot, the creative for a shoot based off of a misfire that I had probably a couple months before that. So we'll get into that after we kind of run through all this other stuff. So let's start with the camera here, and I was using the Canon R5 Mark II. If you want more detailed info in regards to this shoot, I came out with a whole video in regards to comparing this camera to the original R5 and the struggles I had with autofocus during the shoot based off of it was a low light situation. I had a lot of haze coming in from the video sets, the guys wearing their helmets, and I just was having all kinds of trouble with the tracking, autofocus tracking on this camera, which was disappointing. I was hoping that it was gonna, and it might just be, some of that might be user error on my part, not quite being as familiar with this camera at the time. This was back in September, so the camera had only been out for maybe a month or two. But I was using the 24-105 lens with the camera. This is the f4, and this is one of my favorites for this type of work when I know I'm going to be needing like tight portraits, mid-width or mid-length portraits, full body, doing a lot of different action type stuff, and I'm not going to be any more open than f4. And I believe my settings for this shoot where I was at 5.6, 200th of a second, and then looking back here on the computer, my ISO for a lot of these frames was at 320. So I kind of ticked that up a little bit to give my strobes where I could lower the power on my strobes to help them with recycling time and battery life during this full day shoot that we had going. So that was pretty much my camera setup. And so from here, let's jump from the camera. We're going to jump onto the computer. I'm going to walk you through the lighting setup. All right, so this is kind of my computer setup here. You can see a test shot. We actually had a load-in day, like a pre-light day. So this is from that pre-light day. We had one of the creative team dressed out in the uniform. He got a big kick out of that, and we used him as our stand-in model. And what it gave me an opportunity to film this and for the video, and so that I can show you all the lighting setup. I also want to point out over here, you can see kind of this mood board here. This is what they had sent me. We had some creative calls beforehand, and this is kind of where I was able to get a sense of the lighting, what they were looking to capture, the look and feel, to then add into, or to use that to create this lighting setup that we're going to look at. So let me move forward a little bit here. All right, so you can see I've got one of my large boom arms here. Just like I mentioned earlier, I was going to be doing a lot of different action type stuff, and I know with the hockey guys, I need to get standing portraits, and then a lot of them will go down where they have their stick across their thighs there, kind of around their knees, and so they're leaning over, and then some of the guys we do face-offs with, so that light's got to really come down. So I need all that range I can get with the boom there that can raise and lower that key light. Let me move forward. And overall, you can see just where my lights are before I go forward. I needed a lot of space in here because I knew the guys were going to be moving around. We're going to be doing slap shots. They're going to be skating toward me. They're going to be skating across. There's a lot going on, so I have to position my lighting setup in a way where I can maximize that room, but then still get the light on the subject as I need to get, how I need it to look based off of the mood boards that they gave me for their creative. So that all being said, I went with pretty much a symmetrical kind of lighting setup with duplicating the lights on either side, and one of them with the FJ400 here and the 1x4 strip. And then behind that up higher, like I like to do, is a FJ200 just with the reflector up here. And I've preached about that 100 times on this channel. Just if you're looking to add a couple extra lights to your kit, whether it's a Westcott light or a Godox, what have you, these 200 watt lights are a very, when it comes to photo gear, a relatively inexpensive way to add a couple lights to your kit, and they make a big difference. And I do go through that in my lighting tutorial where I show you how it looks based off of you're just one light on your edge compared to two lights. So if you're interested in that, check out the lighting tutorial that'll be linked down below as well. So I'm flipping over here. You can see the two lights that I have on this side as well. No grids on these strips. I do not want to restrict that light coming out of either one of these lights here just because of all the movement that's going to be going on. I want to make that as easy for me as possible and not have to worry too much where the player's located. Also using two of the X-Drop Pro backdrops here. Just want to point this out. In conjunction with their piping and curtains back here. Wanted to block this pole for one reason, and then these curtains had gaps in them. And so these X-Drops just did a great job of filling in the dark background that we were needing, so then the guys can extract the players like they needed for their graphics and all the other uses that they were going to have this season. All right, so let's talk about the key light, which is a 1x3 strip. A little bit different than what I usually use, but for these hockey shoots, the reflection in the visor, the clear visor that they wear, can be a complete nightmare. And I've experienced this firsthand working with some other hockey clubs. And the way I get around that is by using a 1x3 Pro Light mod. And so what this does, instead of having a big circular reflection in their visor, so the curvature of those visors just keeps these modifiers basically the shape that they are. Unlike football, like the football visors, it's a different angle and they stretch out those lights, which can look pretty cool on those visors. No such luck on these, plus it's clear so you see the guy's eyes, and if you have a big round reflection over one of their eyes, it becomes a problem. And that's where using the Pro Light mod here, what it does is, and I'll show some examples, it puts a reflection that looks similar to what the arena lights would look like in the in-game type environment. So that's the reasoning there, and I don't have to worry about the reflection pretty much almost any time. I mean, we have to get it up just a little bit so it's not across their eyes, but it's a huge difference than using like a beauty dish, that type of thing, where you got to get it way out of frame, which then starts to affect your exposure and all that kind of stuff. So along with that, I do have a fill light over here, which at this point you can see it's aimed down. I was bouncing, so I would alternate between bouncing it off the ice, which kind of gives, it would kind of highlight the lower end of that mass just because you're lighting up a lot of ice, which then reflects up. Or I would just kind of tilt it, and depending on what the look was, or I would just kind of aim it kind of right at the player and it would put a little pin light. All that being said, we had so much haze coming into our setup from these video setups around us that it began to kind of collect the light in front of my player. And so whenever you have like smoke, if you work with smoke, and what that does is it almost creates a fill, because it is reflecting, even if the lights are behind, those rim and edge lights, they will hit that smoke and it will reflect back on your player. So after probably the third or fourth player, I just turned off that fill light and just used the smoke and what it was giving us as the fill light for all these images. And you know, the split side of, or the flip side of that is the smoke then was giving this camera, I guess it was one of the elements that was giving this camera a really hard time with the autofocus. So it was kind of a give and take there, but it was what I had to work with. So it just, you know, these types of photo shoots at a certain point, with a lot of them, it just becomes where you are a photographer, but then you're also having to modify yourself or adapt to the settings that you're in, and just trying to problem solve based off of that. So here's kind of where I was located on my phone box there, which I've shown on this channel before. And I had a little mat there where I could kind of stay off the ice. And I want to say too, not sponsored, but I ended up getting these, and I'll link them here. I'll show a picture maybe. These insulated pants. So for those of you who do this type of work or work outdoors, I got these True Work insulated pants, and they were awesome. I was not cold. My legs were not cold at all during the day. I can't recommend those highly enough if you are in the market for something to keep you warm in this type of environment. All right, so you can see also my camera here. I've got the tether tools cable, lever lock on the bottom of the camera. I can't stress what an awesome system that is. And this is one of the new cables they had sent me out earlier. They just came out. I guess they just released them maybe last month. The 10G cable is 31 feet. It does everything you need it to do. All that is linked down below as well. So if you're in need of a tether cable, and the lever lock on the bottom, I've talked about it below the camera, just makes things so much easier when you go to initially set things up. So that is basically the lighting setup. Now let's jump to what I'm talking about on the thumbnail about misfires being potential opportunities. And I just want to point this out, and because some of my favorite images from this shoot resulted from misfires that we will look here in a second, where you could easily have scrolled by them and discarded. But I don't know, somehow I noticed that it had the potential to be, you know, something different than what we were trying to capture, and something, you know, probably on the more dramatic end based off of what lights were not firing. So we'll jump into that in a second, but I want to throw it back to a photo shoot that I had here in the studio a couple years back. And it was the indoor volleyball team from the university over here, and just it was kind of my normal setup. But I had, and this is when I was using Pro Photo B1s, and let me say too, when it comes to these misfires, so no one gets it twisted about certain lights not working as well as other lights. I've worked with multiple brands. You will all come across, or you will come across misfires across all brands. And I don't care how much money you spend on strobes, and Pro Photos are, you know, 2, 3, 4 times more expensive than the Westcott lights I'm using now. But I'm going to talk about an example where I had some misfires with the Pro Photo. I've also used Godox, had misfires with those. There's several different factors that can come into play to create those misfires. One of them is going to be, which we're going to talk about here, your I guess the recycle time, you know, how much you're stressing those lights out based off the power you're using on the lights. Your drive mode speed on your camera and how they're trying to recycle. You could have something just weird with your transmitter going on, or it could be something faulty in the strobe, or it just could be something, just an anomaly going on, which I feel like was probably the case with the Pro Photo. But anyway, going back to that example, I had some of the Pro Photo, I had 2 B1s up, kind of acting like the rim lights, like I showed the 200 watt Westcotts here on the behind the scenes setup on this setup. And for some reason, one of them fired probably, I'm guessing, close to full power a couple of times during that photo shoot with the volleyball team. And I had someone there from the team, or representative, one of the media guys from the university. And the look that it gave us, it was almost like out in full sunshine. And he made a comment, you know, that looks pretty cool, but it was different than what we were doing, so it wasn't something we could like transition to. Plus, it didn't really make sense for that team. But I knew that I had the beach volleyball team coming up, their shoot, and probably 2 or 3 months after this shoot, and so I made a mental note of that. And I made a whole lighting setup around that misfire to where then I actually placed a modifier on, I believe, a beauty dish, and then I gelled it. So then, or either I had a reflector. Anyway, I'm going to link the video up here of that lighting setup and how I made use of, you know, what I saw that day and creating this whole different lighting setup where it was where you could create the look of sun in the studio. But that was from a misfire, and it was just me, I guess, trying to come up with something for an upcoming photo shoot. And his comment there kind of stuck with me, and so then I took that incident and created that whole setup. And this is something that kind of happened here, which I want to show you know, through the sequence. So it was just a sequence that we had of action shots, and as we got toward the tail end, because I was working at the probably the high drive rate here on the camera, and toward the tail end, there's probably 8 frames in or something, a couple of the lights would not fire as they were supposed to. But it gave a different look. And let me say too that, you know, the looks that we got when the lights all worked perfectly was exactly what we were aiming for on the front end. But then this one where the key light didn't fire gave us something a little more dramatic. So let's jump over here. I'm just going to show that sequence. All right, so let's look through what was happening in some of these cases to give me the misfire, and then I'll show you just how the frame looks straight out of camera, and then I will show, you know, how it looked after I retouched it and fixed it up a little bit. All right, so throughout the shoot, I was doing different action sequences. In this case here, it was a slap shot type of situation, and you can see, and let me back it up too a little bit. So like each one of these guys, they do this at a different pace. So I'm trying to time them the best I can to where I'm putting my lights and everything in the best situation to, you know, fully function for me, so we get the shots that we want with everything firing. But, you know, like I said, some of the guys are quicker and slower, and so my timing's a little bit off. I was a little bit off on this one. I started a little bit early, as you'll be able to see right here. But so this is kind of where I start with this, and you can see the frames continuing down, and then he follows through here. So I've got, you know, this shot here, all the lights are working just fine. And then right here you can see one on the edge there. I think it might be the strip it cuts. And then right here, the key light cuts with this other strip back here. And I kind of wish that one had not, you know, not fired. But this right here is the frame that I'm going to show right now as a finished image. But you can see from the onset, this is not that remarkable looking of an image. And that's kind of the point I want to make, is that when you're, you know, you have this happen and you're cycling through these, and instead of just instantly discarding an image like this where there was a misfire, you know, maybe take an extra second or two and see if it might not be able to, or you might be able to turn it into something that could potentially work. And as you saw, you know, back here, these shots are great with all the lights and exactly what the guys are looking for when we go into this shoot. And this right here is something completely different and moody. And it goes to show kind of like over here where instead of the key light being in front of my player, it becomes basically this edge here. So I had some other instances where this just didn't work because this player was more squared up on me and he was just completely in shadow, and to me it's not as interesting as when he was rotated slightly toward this edge like here, and then also have some where they were aiming the other way and it was kind of the opposite type of thing. But so learning from this in the future, if you know, so I retouch these and send them to the team. So if this is something we wanted to work into a setup in the future, you know, body position takes a more, you know, a big role in how this works. So I would have to angle the guys toward the light and that type of thing. So then, you know, we get that kind of rimmed out look on one side. So to counter off the shadowing that's on the other side. So let me jump out of this. And it just so happens too that, and I'm not here to like peddle lights and stuff, but Westcott has just come out with their new lights, which have this mask mode in these lights, which I can probably pull up real quick. where you can pre-program the lights to sequence on and off based off of how you want them to fire. But this is the creative mask mode, where you turn it on. You can set up different patterns of lights firing, not firing, based off of what exposure it is in a cycle. And hopefully in the future I get a couple more of these guys, and I might set up a shoot in here to kind of show that potential off. But it is something that where instead of it being a misfire, you can program these lights now to not fire within a sequence of events, within a kind of a setup like this where you have a sequence going. So then you can purposely capture something like that along with the other image that your client might want. So I just want to point that out, that the technology is kind of here now with certain lights. And I know like with the Pocket Wizard, some of the Pocket Wizard model remotes, you could do that as well. Program lights to fire on and off. And there's some photographers that do really creative work with that. But built into these new Westcott lights is that ability. But just kind of drawing it back here, I just wanted to focus on this little aspect within this photo shoot, to where it's just an opportunity, I think. And it's one of those happy accidents that you don't really think about prior to a shoot. And it's a multitude of different things that can happen, in different types of photo shoots, where I just think if you maybe take a little bit extra time when you go through the results from your photo shoot, you might find something that can trigger your creativity for future setups, that you can make use of something that might have happened just by accident. So that's kind of the bulk of the message I want to get through in this. I mean, probably when this happens, probably 80% of the time, it's basically a throwaway image. But in this case, I found that these images were some of my favorites from this photo shoot. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap it there. If you feel like this video is worthy, please hit the thumbs up. That really helps the channel out here. If you want to see more content just like this in the future, hit that subscribe button down there. Also down there, I've got the new merch available if you want to pick up a hat or hoodie, and the Boom Life t-shirts. Grab one down there, help support the channel. In the meantime, you can also find me on social media over at Instagram at quantzphoto, as well as Pro Light Mods over there on Instagram. Y'all stay safe and healthy out there, and I will see y'all again soon in the next one.